Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another live episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. This is episode 197, and we're doing the World Series preview that we do every year. And we have a exciting series up ahead. It's the Texas Rangers and the Arizona Diamondbacks. Game one is on Friday. And before we get into it, though, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, share with your friends. If you're new here, check out some of our other content. We do an NFL episode every Sunday or Monday, covering that week in the NFL, and then bi-weekly power rankings as well. But joining me, as always, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Getting ready for another excellent weekend of all kinds of sports, including the beginning of this World Series that we're going to cover in today's episode by ranking our 5 best position players and our 5 best starting pitchers. At the end, we'll make our prediction, our reasons why we're making our prediction, how many games in our World Series MVP. But no, I'm getting ready for another excellent weekend of college football, of NFL football, of the highest level of baseball that you can watch. I know there's an F1 race this weekend. So there's a lot going on in the world outside of sports as well. But today we're going to dive into the last 4 to 7 games that we're going to get in baseball until late March of next year when next season begins. Imy and I have yet to go deep into what our off-season baseball coverage will look like. But don't forget, the Major League Baseball operates a little bit differently than, say, the NFL and or the NBA does. First of all, the draft happens in the middle of the season, and there's a bunch of different rules, that apply to the MLB draft than do other sports, which happen in those sports off seasons. And secondly, any free agent that becomes a free agent after the World Series ends is eligible to sign a contract 5 days after the World Series ends. They don't have to wait until a certain date to say December 15th to sign for free agency to open, like they do in the NFL and the NBA, where they have to wait till a certain date to actually sign contract. So who knows? I don't expect it to happen, but we could have Shohei Ohtani signing somewhere 10 days after the World Series is over. So we got to be on our feet kind of during the baseball offseason, but we'll get you more information on what that's going to look like. I'm guessing we'll probably do once the World Series is over. If we can, we'll try to do one baseball episode a month up until spring training starts, and we got to start looking ahead to next season in March. But with all that being said, I know my internet on my end's kind of lagging, so hopefully that doesn't affect us here today. But let's get into this. I wanted to start with the position players, and then we'll go to the pitcher side of things, and then we'll get into our predictions.
Yep. All right. We'll start with you. Who did you have at number 5?
So for me, first of all, I consider a lot of things. It's kind of an inexact science for me, at least, ranking baseball players. But pitchers and position players are completely different entities. So we decided to separate position players and pitchers in these rankings, and we're going to do a top 5 for each. There's a lot that went into this. I think projected impact on this series, current form for the 2023 regular and postseason, and just their overall profiles as players throughout their career. That all kind of went into this. I didn't weigh anything more than anything else. It's just how I view things. So at number 5 on my list, I went with Adolis Garcia. Um, he's an excellent player. He's an absolutely excellent player. He's at number 5 on this list. He's a top 5 player in this World Series. And I think, along with maybe one or two other players on this list, he's got the potential, when he's got that hot bat, like we saw in the ALCS, to completely take over a series and not necessarily win it by himself, but he's got the ability to be the engine of your team. And he's got the ability to be the best player in a baseball series in any given series. When it comes to position players, because people would tell you that pitchers have more value, especially in the postseason. But we can argue about that all day long. He's a good player. This year in the regular season, a 328 on base percentage, that's good. A 508 slugging, that's good. At 836 OPS, that's very good. A 123 OPS plus, which means he was 23% better at the plate than an average Major League Baseball player. In the postseason, he's been scorching hot. If you look at his stats, they will tell you that he's been better than any of the other players on this list. And maybe so in this short period of time. He's been more impactful. I mean, what is he hitting? 357, 400 on base, at 893 OPS, and a 1.293 893 slugging percentage and a 1.293 OPS, which is absolutely ridiculous. Problem for me with Adolis Garcia is there's a little bit of an inconsistency at the plate. He strikes out a ton. The players above him on this list do not strike out nearly as much. And in the field, he's a above average defender, but he's not a great defender. I really like him as a player. I think he's one of the young stars in baseball, but he's at number 5 on my list just because some of the inconsistencies at the plate. He can hit for power, but just like many other hitters in baseball, he does strike out quite a lot. I think there's only 5 players this year, 5 players since 2016, according to Fangraphs, have struck out more times than Adolis Garcia.
Yeah, all those are fair criticisms for sure. But for number 5 on my list, I went with Marcus Semien, which is strange because going into the playoffs, if you're ranking players on the Texas Rangers, you would possibly have them at 2, no lower than 3, maybe. But he's been struggling this playoffs. But just because of the fact that he can get hot at any time. We know what he's capable of as a hitter, and what he provides defensively at shortstop. You can't leave him off the list. But I really see it as neck and neck between him and Adolis. I had Adolis at number 4, just because I think in the postseason, I think the threat of just winning a game for your team at any moment is probably a little bit more valuable than someone who's consistent but hasn't been able to get it done in like the bigger like moments at the plate. I think Adolis Garcia, I would probably compare him to like a hot shooter on a NBA basketball team. Like in the playoffs, you would probably take that hot shooter because at any given point he could go for 7 threes in a key playoff game. But if he's doing it in, say, game 1 rather than, a crucial game 6 or 7, then it still matters a lot. But you need the big time games is where you want to really deliver, and he still has the opportunity to do that in this World Series. So we'll see where it goes for him.
Yeah, those are all fair points. I'll get to And I like some of your points on Marcus Semien. He's actually a little higher on my list. I'll explain why later. Even though he's been struggling in this snapshot of 12 or so postseason games. And he has, to be fair, struggled in the postseason when he's been there in the past with other ball clubs. But I'll get to why I have him a little higher in just a little bit. At number 4, I went with the second baseman for the Arizona Diamondbacks, Ketel Marte, who won the NLCS MVP and has been excellent this postseason. He actually has he's put up somewhat of a comparable slash line to Adolis Garcia this postseason. And he actually has, I believe it's a 16 or 17 postseason game hitting streak that dates back to 2019-ish, I think, somewhere around then. He's been doing it for a while. I would call him one of the more underrated players in baseball the past 6 or 7 years, dating back to 2016. He's been one of the drivers of Arizona's meteoric rise, especially this postseason. And he's been doing it for quite a while. He posted a 6 wins above replacement. It's a metric, a valuable metric in baseball. A 6 WAR season back in 2019, which was his third season as a Diamondback. The criticisms, he was really good this year as well. He's been, if not their best hitter in the postseason, like their top 2, top 3 hitter in the postseason. I believe he either leads off or bats second for them. But injuries and defensive inconsistency at second base, although he is markedly improved there at second base, he's still kind of what I would call an average defender at second base. And that's another part of this. It's not just what you do at the plate. It's about what you do defensively in the postseason. He's improved defensively, but he's still inconsistent. Injuries have held him back. He is on the wrong side of 30. But his hitting has never been in question. And the thing that adds value to Ketel Marte that a lot of people, kind of more casual fans to baseball, and again, I don't claim to be near an expert on baseball, but I have been watching now for about 5-6 years, so I know a little bit. Ketel Marte is a switch hitter, which means he does it from the right side and he does it from the left side. And that gives you more versatility in your lineup from the things that the Diamondbacks can do with that lineup. He's a good base runner. He's marginally better batting from the right side than the left side, but he's still a switch hitter who presents a tough matchup for any pitcher. He puts together good at-bats. He gets on base. He's batting .387 this postseason. He's got power and patience. And the one thing about Ketel Marte is he doesn't strike out nearly at the rate of Adolis Garcia. His strikeout percentage for this year's postseason is less than half of what Adolis Garcia's strikeout rate is. So I went with Ketel Marte at number 4 on my list.
Yeah, I had Ketel Marte at 3 for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, but really that hitting streak I think is extremely valuable. Just reliability and just I think some of the numbers that he's had in I think inning 7 and onward in his postseason career have been absolutely ridiculous. I think he's hitting um, like 600 somewhere in that range. I would have to double check the exact number, but I mean he's been amazing these playoffs. He's been extremely consistent with just and just a energizer almost. Like every time where you think the Diamondbacks are going to go away, it seems like he's the one that starts their key runs in that leadoff spot.
Yeah. Just to be clear, he's batting .387, .406 on base, which means he's getting on base 40% of the time that he steps to the plate. A 581 slugging, which means he's hitting the ball hard. He's hitting for extra bases. He has 5 extra base hits this postseason, 4 doubles, 1 triple. He actually doesn't have he has 2 home runs this postseason. So he's got 5 doubles, 1 triple, and 2 home runs. And he has 9 RBIs. So he's been excellent in this postseason. He's a switch hitter, so he gives you versatility. He's not bad defensively, but I wouldn't call him like a top 5 defensive second baseman in baseball by any stretch of the imagination. But he's a really good player, and he's been consistent in the postseason. It's just some defensive inconsistency and some injuries as an older player that have held him back a little bit. For my number 3, this is where I have Marcus Semien. And the reason I value Marcus Semien a little bit more than, say, maybe you do or other people do, even though it's easy to acknowledge that he's having a rough postseason at the plate, is he is an elite defensive player. One of the reasons the Rangers gave him that deal, whatever it was, 7 years, $155 million, something around there, bring him in with Corey Seager, is because both of those guys are excellent defenders. And in the postseason, there's a saying that you want to be good up the middle, meaning you want to have a good catcher defensively. You want to have great pitching up the middle of the baseball field. You want to have that middle infield set up so you can turn double plays. Nothing gets in either gap. They make the routine plays routinely. And you want to have great defense in center field. And one of the reasons the Rangers brought in Semien is because you can't really find 2 or 3 other players who are comparable at his position defensively in terms of the metrics, that compare to Marcus Semien. And he's been really good defensively this postseason. He's just a consistent player on that side of the ball, and that's valuable in the postseason. Now, he hasn't been very good at the plate this postseason, and that's acknowledged. But this year, he was second in the American League in extra base hits during the regular season. And actually, if you dig a little deeper into his metrics as a somewhat developing baseball nerd, as I am, he's actually hitting the ball hard. He's still hitting the ball. Let me put it this way. His hard contact is good. Like, he still has that hard hit rate that you'd expect on a really, really good player like Marcus Semien to have. The problem is there's been more soft contact than usual. He's had more pop-ups and soft ground balls that result in outs than he usually has. But his line drive rate is up. His hard hit rate is up this postseason. He's just hitting into outs. And he hasn't had the best luck at the plate so far this year. He's still working good at bats. He's still seeing pitches. He's a guy that, as you mentioned, and you made a great point, that I think can turn it on anytime. And if he has a great World Series, then I think most people will either forgive him or forget about what happened the rest of the postseason. I think he's capable of that. But because of the defense, because of some of the metrics at the plate, even though it's not resulted in what you think it should result in, and because of his history as a player and his consistency as a player throughout the regular season, like, I don't know, being top 3 in the American League in WAR during the regular season and being second in the American League in extra base hits this regular season, I have him at number 3 in my rankings.
All right. Yeah, I can definitely see why. I think with him, I kind of struggled to rank him. I think I probably, in hindsight, would probably put him a little higher, but either way, he's got to be somewhere on the list. I think everyone would agree on that.
Yeah,
Uh,
don't question yourself. It's all about what you value. For the points that you made and the reasoning that you made for your ranking, I can't say that you are wrong. Same goes for me, right? Like for
yeah,
the reasons I presented and what I'm valuing, which I think we're not different. Like I still think we probably believe the same things about these players, but for the sake of these rankings, we're just making a little different arguments, and that's why
yeah. I
where we are.
think for me though, I'm still like developing what I value in
Yeah,
baseball players, so it's just really fluid at the moment.
yeah.
So for me at number two, I went with the all-time level rookie Corbin Carroll. Um, we saw what he did in Game 7. I mean, he went 3 for 4, a couple RBIs, and we know what he can do stealing bases as well. He's dangerous once he gets on base. 54 stolen bases this year, um, and that's one of the main reasons I have him up so high on this list. Is you always have to account for this guy. He didn't hit all that great in the NLCS in totality, but we saw in Game 7 he's clutch, and even when even when he wasn't hitting all that great early in this series, um, I mean he strikes fear into the defense with his speed. Like even when he hits a ground out, it puts pressure on the defense just because you got to work quick. He's as fast as it gets as a baseball player, and like that's not even an exaggeration. Um, I think also what he does at it's left field, I believe, right? I'm not entirely. I think it's left field, but I'm not sure. Um, he's a great defensive player as well. He doesn't have the biggest arm in the world, but that doesn't really hold him back too much. Um, but yeah, I think if the Diamondbacks win, you're probably going to see a really good series out of Corbin Carroll and a few stolen bases too.
Here's where we agree. Corbin Carroll's number 2 on my list, and here's how I'll put it. Put simply, I think Corbin Carroll is a budding superstar. If he's not already, a great World Series and a good start to next year, I think we'll put him into that category. Good on the Diamondbacks for seeing this coming. They brought him up at the end of last year, and he did fine for a guy that just entered the major leagues. But this year, as he's still considered a rookie, and he will be considered a rookie until the end of this year, the end of this World Series, as that kind of works a little differently in baseball as well. Maybe one of our off-season episodes ought to be kind of the oddities, explaining the oddities. Maybe it can be a Patreon episode, some of the oddities of baseball rules, but we'll talk about that at a later date. Corbin Carroll, you can just see it. 5-tool player. He does everything. He hits line to line. Great plate discipline. Runs the bases. He's excellent. He's got a good head on himself. He posted a 6 WAR season in his rookie year, which is ridiculous. 6 wins above replacement. He contributed in all phases. Hit 25 homers. So you know he has power. 54. He's not the biggest guy in the world, so you wouldn't necessarily, when you look at him, you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be this 40 home run guy on a consistent perennial basis. But he has power. He can hurt you with power. But when he gets on base, you got to watch him. 54 stolen bases this year. He blew away the league in Fangraphs' base running metric, which basically encompasses all actions on the base pass, and he at least doubled the amount of runs he produced himself of all but 3 players in the league. So he's in the upper echelon, the 99 percentile of base runners in baseball already as a rookie. And I think he's only going to get better. He didn't necessarily hit all that great in the NLCS, but guess what? There are other players on this list and other players in this series that we're not necessarily going to discuss that didn't have good LCSs at the plate either, like one Marcus Semien. So he has it all. He's 23 years old. He's only a rookie. He hit 285s this year. When the moment was biggest, in the biggest game of their season, do or die, win or go home, in Philadelphia, in a hostile environment, he came up big for his team. And I think when you look at the biggest difference, and this is what I'll finish with, when you look at the biggest difference between, say, the 2021 Diamondbacks of 2 years ago, who lost 110 games, and the 2023 Diamondbacks, who find themselves on the brink of a World Series title, their second in franchise history, the biggest difference is that man right there, Corbin Carroll.
Yeah, definitely.
Number 1, I have Corey Seager. How about you?
Yeah, Corey Seager. I mean, it's pretty simple. I think what he's done this year, I mean, was right up there in MVP discussions the entire year. I think, is going to finish top 2 if I'm not, forgetting anyone off the top of my head right now. But, I mean, you can't understate the value he has to the team. Like whether he's hitting or not, whether he's, um, you know, hitting home runs like he usually does in the regular season or not. Um, the fact that he can get hot at any time, the fact that he has to be pitched to differently than other players, um, it keeps everybody on edge when he walks up to the plate.
Yeah, there are reasons, plural, to why the Rangers 2 years ago, back when they had that big shortstop free agency class that we talked about on this podcast with Carlos Correa, Corey Seager, and others, there's a reason why the Rangers wanted Corey Seager and why they paid $200+ million for him. Number 1, he was coming off winning both NLCS MVP and World Series MVP for the Dodgers back in 2020 in the shortened season when the Dodgers won the World Series. Number 2, he's just an excellent player. One of the reasons I put him at number 1, beyond everything else that we could talk about, I mean, I could give you all the goods of Corey Seager here for the next 5 minutes, but I won't waste your time, is because I think he plays the most important position in baseball other than being a starting pitcher in the postseason. And that's shortstop. For me, maybe you can argue center field, but for me, I think shortstop's the most important position to play on a baseball field. And he's very, very good defensively. Some call him excellent, but either way, he's a plus player on the defensive side, really good shortstop, and he's an excellent player at the plate. We don't really need to go any further than that, but in case you didn't know, Corey Seager this year posted a 6.9 WAR, wins above replacement, which is higher than Corbin Carroll, higher than anyone else that'll play in this series, at least from a position player standpoint, at the shortstop position. He had 156 hits. He had 33 home runs. He batted .327 at the plate for the entire season, with a .390 on base, a 623 slugging percentage, and a 1.013 OPS, and a 170 OPS plus, which means he was 70% better than the average baseball player. He's just an excellent player. And he's got the most developed resume of any of these hitters in this series. He's a 4-time All-Star. He's a 2-time Silver Slugger. He has an NLCS MVP and a 2020 World Series MVP in his bag. He's a World Series champion. He's been on this big stage before. He was Rookie of the Year. He won Rookie of the Year when he came up. So he's been through that. And in this postseason, on Baseball Reference, just really fast, I want to see. Yeah, he's been really good. He's been excellent. He's batting over 300 in this postseason as well. So he's just a really, really, really good player. That probably in most years, if it weren't for, say, I don't know, Shohei Ohtani or Aaron Judge or a lot of these other elite players in the American League, could garner some and should garner some MVP votes.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know the full extent of his resume. I know he was a World Series MVP, but I didn't realize he was already a 4-time All-Star. I think that kind of caught me off guard. I mean, he's an extremely accomplished player, and he's in his prime. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, it kind of feels inevitable that this might be a series that we look back on as the Corey Seager series. So it's not a given, but this series is going to be definitely, or at least the outcome of the series is going to be affected by how good Corey Seager is. Definitely.
He's got 16 career postseason home runs, 42 postseason RBIs. I don't know if you'd call him a base runner. I don't think that's particularly his strong suit, but he's not a bad base runner. Like, I don't see Corey Seager making terrible decisions on the base pass. And as you watch more baseball, you'll understand what I mean by that. 39 walks in the postseason. He's just an all-around really, really good player. I guarantee you, if you call the other 29 teams in the league and you say, hey, would you today take Corey Seager as your shortstop? I bet at least 25, 26 of them say absolutely. I have to think about the whole lamp of the because there are other great shortstops out there, right? I mean, Corey Seager isn't the only great shortstop in baseball right now. But I guarantee you most of them, maybe there are 1, 2, or 3 teams that would take their current guy just as much or more than they would want Corey Seager, but pretty much everyone would say absolutely. So there you are. All right, let's move on to pitchers. So those are our top 5 position players. There are other guys who absolutely deserve to be mentioned, who can maybe be mentioned in a World Series recap. But, I mean, guys like Josh Young, Evan Carter, Gabe Moreno for the Diamondbacks, those kind of guys absolutely deserve credit for what they've done. They just didn't make our list. But those would absolutely be, if we did a top 10, they would be on our list. So let's move on to the pitcher side of things. Who did you have at number 5 on your pitchers list?
At number 5, I had Brandon Pfaadt, rookie pitcher who really, I think, surprised a lot of people, including myself. I think a few months ago, if you probably told him what he was doing right now, I don't know if even he would believe. I mean, he was in the minors at a certain point this season. Started out in the majors, played horribly, and then got moved down and then moved back up, and now he's doing what he's doing on the biggest stage in the playoffs. So it's been extremely impressive, and he's striking out people consistently. That's been the crazy part to me is there's been no struggle with command in terms of just being nervous or just um, like at certain points you see pitchers kind of have pitches that they struggle with. He's had his entire arsenal of pitches to use. There hasn't been a pitch that he hasn't been able to trust up to this point. Um, and I don't think that's going to change. I think at this point, like he's a guy they're relying on, and you can feel confident in.
Absolutely. I had a number 5 as well. Look, he's a hyped rookie who wasn't very good to start the year when he came up, like a lot of other rookies when they come up. Pretty normal thing to happen because you have to adjust to the major leagues coming out of the minor leagues. He was optioned to AAA in the middle of the season, but he was brought back up. He found his stride later on in the year, and he's looked like a very, very solid middle of the rotation type arm that will be of very good value to the Diamondbacks moving forward. I view him, if we're going to do a breakout player episode as part of our preview series for next season, possibly, he would be on my list. I think he's due for a springboard breakout 2024 campaign. Maybe he can be, maybe not to the level of Corbin Carroll, but maybe in a figurative way, he can be the Corbin Carroll of next year's Diamondbacks from a pitching standpoint. That's what I kind of see Brandon Pfaadt as. You're right. He has been striking people out. He's only given up 3 walks this postseason in 16.2 innings. That's another thing that people don't think about enough in the postseason is you can't be erratic. You can't walk batters, give teams free passes on the base pass because then it puts you in those stressful situations you don't want to be in. He's got a 1.0 whip in this postseason, which is really, really good. He's just been good. He's given up 5 runs this postseason, 3 of which were in the wild card series. First sort of MLB postseason experience. But he's in total in 4 games started, he's got a 2.7 ERA, which is really, really good. And if this current version of Brandon Pfaadt is your, say, 3rd or 4th starter in a postseason series, you can win a World Series with that. Absolutely.
Definitely. At number 4, I had Jordan Montgomery. I think for obvious reasons, you probably are between him and Merrill Kelly for that 4 spot and that 3 spot. But for me, I went with Jordan Montgomery because, as solid as he has been, I think the fact that he relies on that curveball so much and getting swings and misses, he doesn't. To me, he doesn't throw enough strikes to have that consistency, and that's where I would give Merrill Kelly that edge. But from a style standpoint, they're pretty similar pitchers. I mean, they're topping out at like 92, 93, 94 miles an hour most of the time. They're not necessarily power pitchers, but for what they have been, they've been really solid, and they've been getting it done nonetheless.
Yeah, I'll just be straight up. We have them flip-flopped, but I think it's splitting hairs.
Yeah.
For me, I went Merrill Kelly. Look, in this postseason, he actually did not pitch for whatever reason in the wild card series. I guess just because it was a 2-game sweep, so they didn't really need him. But he's 2-1 this postseason in 3 starts, limited sample size, a 2.65 ERA, 17 innings pitched. Sorry, I hate these random ads that sometimes pop up on your screen on Baseball Reference. He's got 19 strikeouts. One of the things, though, that has worried me with Merrill Kelly is sometimes his control can get a little erratic, especially you have to watch this with guys that throw a lot of breaking balls is what I was trying to say there. And obviously both these guys are similar in that they kind of work their fastballs off their breaking ball instead of the opposite. They're not power pitchers like, say, Garrett Cole. They're more my curveball. I'm going to throw my slider, and I'm going to work in my fastball where appropriate, depending on the matchup. They're very similar in that way, lower velocity, but very effective most of the time. They're pretty consistent, I think, both of them. Like, their bad isn't like they've got very high floors, but very low ceilings as pitchers, I think. I don't think you're going to see either of these guys win the Cy Young one day. I just don't think they have the stuff to do that. They're not up there with the elite of the elite. But they get the job done. And in the postseason, if Merrill Kelly doing what he's doing is your 2 or 3 starter, you're in good shape.
Yeah.
He's been very reliable. I put Montgomery at 3. I'll just go ahead and, talk about why. I know Jordan Montgomery very well because as a Yankees fan, I watched him come up through the minor leagues, and he was a very good pitcher, 3 or 4 starter for the Yankees for years. Had his ups and downs in the postseason as a Yankee, but as a Cardinal, when he was traded at last year's deadline, he was very good for that team. And, he grew out the facial hair. He did not look like that as a Yankee for other reasons. But you kind of know what he is. I mean, he's been an excellent number 1, number 2 guy, along with a guy we'll probably mention in a little bit for the Rangers. He's had to step into a more elevated role. He's done an excellent job of that. We know he's more of a pitch to contact type guy, and he does rely a lot on that deceptive curveball. That's pretty good most nights. And it's his go-to pitch. He throws it 22% of the time. You're absolutely correct on that. But I do like him in that most of the time, it leads to soft contact, and he doesn't actually have to rely on the strikeout as much. He can he can get outs in multiple ways. Now, there's the flip side of that, which is the more balls in play means, more left to luck. There's more margin for error there. You're probably going to get a couple hits a game due to soft contact that just, drop in front of an outfielder or, you can see both sides of that equation. But I think because of his extended body of work in the postseason, what he's done this year, I'd have him slightly above Merrill Kelly. But, I mean, really, we're really, really splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Yeah. Number 2, I had Nate Eovaldi. Pretty self-explanatory. I mean, he's been the rock for that team. I mean, he hasn't really missed a beat this entire pro season, it feels like. And when he's pitched, it's pretty much been, you can pretty much chalk it up as a win almost.
yeah, because of how the way I've structured these particular rankings, and I'm kind of projecting a little bit in that based on the amount of value and the amount of impact I think each pitcher is going to have on this particular series, which I didn't mention at the beginning, and I should have. I put Zach Gallen at number 2 and Nate Eovaldi at number 1. But again, I think you're splitting hairs. The reason I put – here's how I'll explain it. The reason I put Eovaldi at number 1 is because considering the entire body of work, which may be a little bit unfair in this scenario, but I think it would be unfair to just acknowledge, this season and not consider their entire body of work as a player, at least going back a couple of years, and to just ignore what they've done in their past. If you want to know what a proven postseason performer, what a big game performer looks like, it's Nathan Eovaldi. In 69 innings in the postseason, going back to when he won a World Series with Boston back in 2018, he's got a 2.87 ERA. He's been good again this year. He hasn't lost. He's 4-0 in his starts with a sub 2.5 ERA. And this has been him for the entirety of his career. He just pitches really well in the biggest games, and that's where he's gotten his nickname, Big Game Nate. And he deserves it. And look, he was probably, if we look back on it, from the end of last year, the most underrated offseason acquisition of last season, considering the impact that he's had on the Rangers. He did get hurt middle of the year, struggled a little bit in the middle of the year, but had an excellent start to the year, and he's having an excellent finish to this year. And throughout his career, he's been excellent in the postseason by all metrics. Now, for Zach Gallen, I think he's probably the better pitcher, like from a skill standpoint and a stuff standpoint, than Eovaldi is. And if you want to just go based on that, that's absolutely fair. I mean, Zach Gallen's a guy that's going to get NL Cy Young votes for what he did this season. And he has a higher ceiling as a pitcher, number one, because he's younger, and number two, because I think his stuff and the mix of pitches that he throws is better than Eovaldi's. So I understand it from that perspective. I could see Zach Gallen winning a Cy Young in the near future. I don't see that, with all due respect to Nate Eovaldi, in Eovaldi's future, just because he's a little bit older. He pitches in the American League, and there are other really great pitchers in the American League who have better stuff and are just more recognized. And next year, Eovaldi, if he's still on the Rangers, will not be the ace of this ball club as long as maybe Scherzer or that guy named Jacob deGrom is pitching. And usually, if you're not even the best pitcher on your team, you're not winning the Cy Young. But look, Zach Gallen, absolutely, I could see it. Could be number one. Maybe it's a little bit of Yankees fans' PTSD here, because back in that 2018 ALDS, Nate Eovaldi absolutely shut down that Yankees lineup. He's done it to many other teams. It's not just a Yankees thing. But whether it's the regular season or the postseason, big games, Nate Eovaldi comes through. And I'm not even going to nitpick Zach Gallen for struggling in the NLCS, because that would be unfair. And he was going up against a lineup that does that to many other great pitchers. So, again, like Montgomery and Kelly, I think Eovaldi and Gallen, depending on what you value and what your argument is it's really, really close.
Yeah, I went with Gallon because I he's just due for a bounce back. I think,
That's absolutely fair.
and I mean, I think the argument for Uvalde for this series in particular, obviously, is the experience and the fact that if the Rangers are going to win this series, they have to get length out of their starters,
Yeah.
um, which they've had to do the entire playoffs, and they've done it. So Uvalde will play a major factor for the Rangers, and there's no question about that. But I think for Gallon though, I don't know which games he's going to be starting, but um, I think I think he'll have a better showing than he did in the NLCS.
I would agree with that. Um, it's just kind of the way you view it. Now, coincidentally enough, starting game one of the World Series tomorrow, it'll be Nate Eovaldi against Zach Gallen. So we will see. Um, that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. Maybe we'll do some more player rankings and it's something we really haven't experimented with all that much, like we maybe have in other sports. But maybe we'll do some sort of bracket and or player rankings or something along those lines in the off season, because I thought that was really, really fun. It's fun to see what you view, how I view things, and what may be different and that sort of thing. I think there are good conversations to be had. Okay, 15 minutes left, max. I don't want to be on here too much longer, but let's get to our breakdown, our quick breakdown of the series and who we think wins. So before we get to our World Series MVP, who do you think wins the World Series and why?
I've got the Rangers winning in 7 games. Um, I think these two teams. I think there's going to be games where the Diamondbacks pitching just absolutely dominates, and there's going to be games where the Rangers come out and you
One.
know light up the scoreboard as they've been doing. I think it's just a mix of both, and I think poetically it'll kind of come down to Game 7. Just whoever makes that extra big play at the plate, or it could be defensively too. Doesn't either way. It's just going to be a play here or there. I think that wins this series. Um, and to me, the Rangers get that benefit of the doubt because of the depth in their lineup and not only the power, but I think they've shown a different level of, you know, their ability to have big innings. And that's so big in the postseason. Just not only getting that first wave of hitting early in an inning, but then adding it up into a second wave of hitting. A perfect example of that was that Game 7. I think it was the 6th inning or something like that. They completely opened that game open, or that just blew that game open with that grand slam, and then before the inning was even done, they were right back on base with 2 on base with 2 outs and looking to even extend the lead even further. So they keep their foot on the gas, and if they have big innings in this series, then I don't know how the Diamondbacks can really combat that with their style of play.
I almost want to pick the Diamondbacks just for the theater of it, but I've been going back and forth,
Yeah.
and I actually landed the same as you. I'm giving the Rangers the benefit of the doubt. I think what they did against the Astros, I mean, Rangers fans don't want to admit it, but that Astros team, I mean, especially after going down 3-2,
Yeah.
like that, what they did, I don't think any other team has done that before. And I just think that's going to give them the extra confidence that they need to come out and win this series. Like now, if they fall down 3-2 in this series, I don't worry about them one bit. They've been in that position against the team that has ruled baseball for the last half decade. And a team that's not going to go that's not going anywhere in the state of Texas anytime soon. Although their manager did announce his retirement today, which we'll have to talk about when the offseason comes around because the Houston Astros are now looking for a new manager. And congratulations to Dusty Baker on what is a great Hall of Fame career. With that being said, you're right. The depth of this lineup, I trust it a little bit more than I do the Diamondbacks. Just listen to this. Marcus Semien, who, just like you mentioned with Zach Gallen, I think it's totally fair to say that Marcus Semien could be due for a bounce back in this series. I think it could happen at any point.
Definitely.
Corey Seager, who we raved about. Evan Carter, who we haven't even mentioned yet, but he's been an excellent rookie ever since he came up late in the year. Adolis Garcia is in the 4 hole, and we saw what he did in just taking over basically that Astros series after the whole get hit with the pitch Brian Abreu situation. And then after that, it doesn't get any easier because you have Josh Young, who's an excellent young third baseman, Mitch Garver, who comes over from the Twins and has done some good things for them. He gets on base. Nate Lowe, who, to be honest, up until late in the Astros series, didn't really do much at the plate for the entirety of the postseason, but he's just sitting in the 7 hole. And I think he ran into a home run either in game 6 or game 7. I can't remember which game it was. And then Jonah Heim, who's been excellent at the catcher position, and Leota Taveras, who's probably been the best 9-hitter in the postseason that I've ever seen since I began watching baseball 5 or 6 years ago on a consistent basis. Then you have Robbie Grossman, who's available off the bench as a smash-hitting lefty. They've been the best offense in the playoffs by pretty much all metrics. They had one of the best offenses in baseball all season long. They've got a tremendous top 4, a relentlessly solid bottom half of their lineup, especially in the 8-9 holes that can flip the lineup. And I think, based on what we've seen in the postseason, even though if I were building a team and I wanted to take one of these 2 bullpens, I would take the Diamondbacks bullpen. Even with that being said, and I think the Diamondbacks will put up a fight in this series. They will win a couple games in this series because that's what they've done all season. They're a confident ball club as well. They absolutely ran through the Dodgers, and they just beat the Phillies, who a lot of people thought were going to win the World Series. So just like, say, the Rangers down the Astros, the Diamondbacks have been through the gauntlet as well in the National League. And they've got their fair share of guys in that lineup that continue to hit this postseason. It starts with Ketel Marte and Corbin Carroll, but Ludris Gurriel Jr. has been excellent in the postseason. He's been one of the better hitters. Gabe Moreno, Tommy Pham, who's a veteran in the middle of that lineup, and Christian Walker, who's a rookie and hasn't really hit this postseason. But just like all the other guys that we've talked about, who knows? He could be due for a breakout in this World Series. Like, baseball's just a fickle sport. It's sort of unpredictable. We don't know. We think we know, but we don't. Yeah. But I love Torey Lovullo, their manager. Torey Lovullo, I think is how you say it, actually. Alec Thomas, Perdomo. Like, this Diamondbacks team absolutely deserves all the credit. I think they'll take this series to the brink because they have enough pitching as well. But if it comes down to the Rangers at home in the Game 7 with their offense, with big-time performers like Corey Seager, who have been in this spot before, and Max Scherzer, who have been in this spot before, and whoever else they have available in their bullpen at that particular time, Jordan Montgomery, maybe even a Nate Eovaldi, because I'm guessing if he's starting game 1, he'll probably pitch game 5, and then will probably be available a couple days later out of the bullpen to pitch game 7, maybe 1 or 2 innings. I just think, along with the fact that, and maybe this doesn't matter at all, but Bruce Bochy has never lost a World Series. He's 4-0 in World Series in his managing career. I slightly give the edge to the Rangers. I think my World Series MVP, I kind of want to go with like a good story, but I'm gonna go Adolis Garcia. I think he continues to do what he's been doing. I think he'll have a really, really good series. Although you could, if you wanted to, you could honestly pick Evan Carter. Like if you see him having a big series as like a really good story, I could see that.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Evan Carter, and that's really just gut feel. And obviously, he's a great player as well. But hitting cleanup in this lineup, it kind of feels like he's gonna have the opportunity. That there's no question about that. Over the course of this series, it's just whether or not um, he comes up and steps up to it. I think the misconception might be like, oh, we're picking the Rangers because the Diamondbacks are young, they're just happy to be here. No, 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 no. That's not why. It's really, I mean, this series is a coin flip. That's how I see it. I really don't see it as, oh, one team's going to dominate. I would be shocked if one team or another wins the series in 5 games or less. That would just completely come out of nowhere to me, at least.
Yeah, I think the Rangers are top to bottom probably a little bit better of a baseball team with more experience, but I mean, hell, that doesn't really mean
Yeah,
much.
Arizona
It
is
all
on
comes
fire
down
right
to it.
now.
Yeah. Both teams are brimming. The good thing is both teams are brimming with confidence. Both teams have very capable offenses, top to bottom, with young players who have never been on the stage before but are performing really, really well and have had their moments here and there in the postseason. Both have, I wouldn't say excellent starting rotations, but good starting rotations that are capable of winning the World Series. Both have really good and smart managers, and both have bullpens that can be shaky at times, but have been probably the reason they're here. I mean, let's be honest. Like, if the Rangers don't get what they've gotten out of their bullpen, which was shaky in the postseason, as good as their offense is, there's they're probably not here because you just don't get to the World Series without having a bullpen that can, for at least a couple games, when starters don't go as long as you think they are, or you think they will, can get outs, can get those last 12 or 15 outs of a game. Like they're almost mirrors of each other as teams. I mean, both were wild card teams. Both have a couple rookies. Uh, I think it's going to be a fantastic series. I think it'll go 6 or 7 games. If it doesn't, I'd be very surprised, like you would be. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so we have our predictions. Last thing I wanted to mention is, I don't mean to put you on the spot. There's one thing that you've learned over the course of this baseball season, and we'll probably at some point do a baseball recap episode as we start our off-season stuff. But there's one thing that stands out to you about this baseball season, one overarching theme that you've seen or something that you've learned. It can be anything. What would that be?
Well, I think I've learned that baseball isn't played on paper. That's kind of been a theme with a bunch of teams that went out and spent and spent and spent in the off season, and then came into the regular season and didn't deliver. I mean, the Padres, the Mets are the two main ones that stand out, but even the Yankees as well. Um, I mean, you can really play 500 baseball for 3 months out of the season and then have a good month to close out and then be right there in the playoffs. And if you're hot, then you've got as good a shot as anybody, as any 100 win team would.
Yeah, I think 4 of the top 5 payrolls coming into the season missed the playoffs. So for me, I think it's parity is increasing in baseball.
Yep.
And it's at an all-time high right now. It's probably going to get higher as we move into next year. And I think along with that, I think you would call the rule changes that Major League Baseball made, and to their credit, because they've been stubborn in the past, were overall a huge success.
And I think the rule changes also made it easier for young players to come in and have success right away. Also,
Yes,
I mean, not only just the steals, but the defensive shifts as well. I mean, the fact that you can, you know, have some of those hits in the gaps that you weren't able to in past years. I mean, that makes a huge difference.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Well, hopefully we see a great World Series. I think we will. Again, both of us have Rangers winning in 7, but I see it either way, honestly. Um, and I have Adelise Garcia winning World Series MVP. Emmy has Evan Carter. So, with all that being said, that's going to do it for tonight's episode. Thank you to our viewers for tuning in. Hopefully, you guys enjoy this episode and are hopefully able to listen to it, if not before game 1, at least sometime early on in the series, because I think our player rankings still apply there. And you can hear what we predicted, as it is Thursday, October 26th, the night before game 1. So for Emmy Nixon, for myself, Michael Ween, coming to you from Houston, Texas. We might see you this weekend for an episode. We don't know yet. But if not, we will see you Sunday or Monday night for our Raw Rundown, and next Wednesday for our NFL Power Rankings. And then we will have more Dit Hole as well coming to you soon. So, with all that being said, if Emmy doesn't have anything else he wants to say, I guess just like the baseball season, after these next 4 to 7 games, we are gone into the off season.
Or just like the first pitch of the World Series, Ketel Marte is going to get a hit into right center field. I'm calling it right now.
All
Peace
right.
out.